My name is Miriam Goodman-Miller. Currently, I am the crafts supervisor at Seattle Opera in the costume shop. I've been in that position since 2017, but I've been freelancing there since the early 2000s. I went to the University of Washington and took their undergrad generic theater degree. And in the last year I was there, I started doing, there was a bunch of backstage credits you had to get. And so I was helping in the costume shop to get my costume credit because I did not want to run a show because that was not my jam. And then after that, I got an internship at the rep, and the timing worked out that the crafts person was leaving, and so I got hired there. I'd been fabric dyeing forever. Like I was doing fiber reactive tie dyes in my parents' basement when I was 13. I'd always been sewing. Both of my grandmas were very avid sewers and knitters, so I'd always done that kind of stuff. I worked sewing hats at a place in college, so that kind of helped with that aspect of things. So my skill set just kind of came from everywhere, and school. Um, and then the position opened up, so I was on staff at the rep for a couple of years, and then I switched over to freelancing. When I was freelancing, I think the first time I worked at the opera was 2003 for Carmen. And there were some years where that was the main place that I worked. I'd work there about 9 months out of the year. And then a few years ago, the position at the opera opened up, and I applied for it and got it. It is wide and varied, which is one of the reasons I love it. The opera, some of our shows are very small, like 9 people, and some of them are very, very large with a chorus of 50 and 10 actors and a principal cast of 20 and band on stage wearing costumes and stagehands on stage wearing costumes. So sometimes I'm just supervising myself, and it's me just basically polishing shoes and labeling them and making sure that everything is organized enough for wardrobe to be able to take it to the venue and do their job. And sometimes I'm in charge of 3 or 4 other people, and I have to keep them all busy, all while running into fittings and doing some patterning and maybe doing some dyeing and doing some paint samples. So it's a wide and varied skill set that I have to have for this particular position. There's dyeing fabric either to make it the right color for something, or to make it, a lot of times what we have to do is something will be too white on stage, so we have to do what we call taking it down so that it's actually a cream color, but when the bright stage lights are shining on it, then it looks white, and not blinding people. A lot of times we can't find the exact perfect shade of red, so we'll get some fabric in a white, and I'll try to make that perfect shade of red. Or and with painting, there's a lot of it is making stuff that's brand new look dirty, because a lot of operas have a lot of very poor peasants in them, and they have to look grubby. It would look really funny if they were on stage wearing pristine new clothes. So a lot of times it's actually like new clothes that the costume shop has tailored, and then it comes to me and I have to make it look like it's not brand new. And then I'm in charge of the millinery, which is hat making, which can be, little hair doodads or big crazy period hats like tricorns, or sometimes some weird fantasy crowns, or it really it varies by the time period and the designer, which is one of the things I really love about the job. And so, but those challenges are different every time you do the opera, even if it's the exact same production. So that keeps it interesting for me. A lot of times there's physical shoe notes, like I have to stretch them, or I have to paint them, or this elastic is shot, we have to replace the elastic. And then a lot of times there's more design things where you have to, all of the shoes of the women have to be in this range of cream colors. So I always do the physical notes first, because if a shoe can go on stage the wrong color, but it can't go on if it's not going to fit them. So I do that. People think of crafts as a lot of hot glue, and it can be, but it really shouldn't be, because that'll fall apart, and then you can't reuse those feathers because there's glue all over them. I'm a firm believer in trying to make things reusable, so that you can, that hat could become some different hat, and if there's hot glue all over it, it's much harder on you later. I have to do a lot of organizing. I have to do a lot of, when you have a chorus of 50 people, how do you keep all of their black shoes that are identical going to the right person when we get over to McCaw Hall? So there's a whole lot of labeling, a whole lot of sorting, a whole lot of stuff in bags with people's names on it. I also have to track if it's a rental show, to make sure that the items that are Seattle Operas go back to Seattle Opera, and the items that are somebody else's go and ship away with the rest of the show once we're done with it. So there's a lot of tracking and organizing and kind of administrative stuff that I do too. Well, I have the main innovation that I've done is I have a shoe intake area. It's basically a shelf with a bunch of Rubbermaid bins. And as I come out of a fitting, sometimes with, some shows, every chorus member will have 3 pairs of shoes, and a lot of them will all look exactly the same. And I come out of the fitting with them with a little tag on it that says who they go to. And so I've created this place where I can just kind of set them there. And then as I have time throughout the day and during the fittings, I can label them and I can sort them as far as what needs to be done to them. And in that sorting process, I also, at that station, my intake station, I go through my notes and kind of subdivide them into priorities and what can be grouped together. So that way it kind of, it gives me a sense of scale of the project when I put my hands on everything, but it also allows me to just let it go and hand someone a pile of things and be like, here, this is what you do, go for it, and not have to micromanage that. Like I try to set everything up when it comes out of the fitting as if someone else was going to do it, so then I don't have to think so hard. So I think it's 2017, 2018, we moved into the Opera Center, which is a brand new building that was designed specifically for us. And the costume shop really won in terms of new space. And we have huge windows with lots of light, and crafts in particular won because we actually upped our square footage. And we now have a general outside kind of sewing area. That's where I do the bulk of my work and administrative tasks. That's in the same space as the main workroom. And then I have a dye room that is just for dyeing. There's a washer, a dryer, a hot plate, proper ventilation now, which was kind of a year-long battle. And then we also, and a 40-gallon dye pot. So we can do quite a significant amount of dyeing in there. And we also have what we call the clean paint room, which is for when we store a lot of supplies in there, and we store all our paint, and it's for when we have like fabric painting that needs to be done, and distressing that we're doing with like brushes and sponges. And then adjoining that, we have a room that's got a spray booth in it. So if we're using more toxic products, or if we're getting stuff heavily airborne, then we do that inside the spray booth with a respirator and a fan on, and we let things air out properly. So I have to keep the SDSs, the safety data sheets, up to date with any new product that we request in the shop, which is, kind of important for the safety of all concerned. As a costume shop, we're really working towards using less and less toxic products and trying to figure out ways to not have nasty chemicals airborne. So, you know, is there a way to brush that on instead of airbrushing it? Is there a glue that you don't have to put on a respirator to use? Is there, you know, and that's part of the whole safety data sheet tracking too, is knowing how to read those and how to say, oh, wow, I really should never use this product again. Or, oh, this just has salt in it. That's not so bad. There are a lot of roles in the costume shop, and I am one of the people that interacts with pretty much every other subsection of costumes. So as we're doing the build, I work with hair and makeup very closely to find out what the wigs are going to be for the show, because we usually wig stuff, because again, when you have a chorus of 50 people, if you have to style everyone's natural hair, that's going to take a lot longer than popping a wig on their head and keeping the wig styled. We share a wall in the new space, and so I will go into their fittings while they're trying wigs on people and pop my hats on, and we can talk about hat placement and if it needs horsehair to help pin into the hair, or you know, oh, that really doesn't fit, or and talk about whether we adjust the hat or we adjust the hair. So that is just really great and is really upped our level of communication, just being in the same space. I also, you know, I work very closely with the shop manager and the show manager in terms of how I'm doing on my numbers. We predict, you know, how long everything that I'm going to touch is going to take. And once a week we have a meeting where all the different teams come together and say what their numbers are. If, as often as the case with crafts in the beginning of a build, there's not as much to do until after the fittings. So I'll be like, well, I've got 5 extra days if someone wants to borrow my helper as a stitcher, just to kind of keep all the teams moving forward. I also have to work with the cutters, so that, because sometimes there's items that we're not sure if it's a garment or a crafts piece. So, but if it's leather, I will almost definitely make it. And if it's fabric, usually they will make it, but then sometimes it'll come to me. So there's a lot of that kind of negotiating and communicating and seeing who has time to do what and working together in that respect. I work with wardrobe fairly closely in terms of, okay, this is the necklace that the principal lady wears in Act 2, and then she wears it again in Act 4, but she throws this cross on it, and a lot of that kind of detail-oriented stuff it has to come through in my labels and my plastic bags that I put all the stuff into. Actually, the last show, I worked very closely with the props person. Our last show was Charlie Parker's Yardbird, which involves having the corpse of Charlie Parker on stage for quite a bit of time. And it is on stage with the performer who's singing the role of Charlie Parker too. So, and we had a double cast Charlie Parker, and props didn't quite have the capacity to do a life casting of the person's head, and neither did I. So we had it 3D printed, and then I did all the finishing work on the print of the head, and then props worked on the body. So we had to work together a lot in terms of like, okay, how is this body going to connect with the head? Is the scale right? Are we using the same skin tone color? I really liked making the Charlie Parker heads. Like, that was really fun. I haven't gotten to do a lot of sculpting, so it was outside of my comfort zone, but it was challenging in a good way. And often there's situations where, especially with weapons, where the belt or the baldric that the sword or the gun goes into is costumes, but then the weapon itself is props. So props has to bring in the weapon to our fittings so that we can make sure that it fits into it and the performer knows how it's going to work with their belts or their baldrics. So yeah, I work with props quite a bit too, and they have better tools than I do, so I'll borrow tools from them. They're very specialized, and there's there's certain things that you just come to know how to deal with opera performers. Like in general, they don't like tight things around their neck because they need it for their breath and their expansion. And so if at all possible, we work with the designer to make it like, can we make that collar a little looser? Can that necklace hang a little lower? And I always make sure to check in with them about that. There's been times where like earrings were too loud. They didn't feel like they could hear the orchestra or their fellow performers well enough. So, because hearing is really important. Oftentimes, there's a lot of nuns in operas. And so oftentimes we'll have like 18 nuns on stage. And wimples are often like 3 or 4 layers of fabric, which makes it really hard to hear what your coworkers are doing on stage when they're singing. And so we'll, in the bottom layer, we'll add a mesh hole so that they can hear more clearly through it. So then it's only the veil going over that's covering their ears. So there's just weird little tricks like that that are kind of specific to opera and sometimes musical theater that you wouldn't necessarily need to do in a straight play because they're just talking, not singing. Opera, one of the things I love about it is it has a tendency to plan years in advance so that you can get the singers you want and the directors that you want. So that's really nice. It's just that everything, by the time it comes to me, my manager has been working on the show for 2 years. And so it's all very organized and we know what materials we're going to need. It's not, there's a lot of theaters that are much more fast paced. You know, they have a 4-week build as opposed to sometimes we'll have an 8 to 10 week build. So I really appreciate that. There's a lot more multiples. Like, again, you have to make 18 nuns wimples. So there's a lot of just sitting and sewing and putting on your music or your book and just going for it. But sometimes that can be really nice too, because then you can really perfect your techniques and what you're doing. And we have enough time to be like, okay, I'm going to rework that since I have to make it for 18 more people. And you figure that out. And I really love that part of the process of being able to make it better than you normally would. Depends on the designer because there's so much personality stuff that happens. So I tend to be very trepidatious and very cautious in my communications, making sure that they know that I'm there for them and that I want them to be happy. And because it can be tricky because you want to give them a beautiful finished product, but you don't want to step on their toes design wise. And I think crafts especially, there can be some of that because, you know, you're decorating a hat and, you know, it's in the 1860s style and that's not your aesthetic. And so you make it look too modern and then the designer gets upset. Or maybe it is an 1860s hat, but the designer wants it to feel modern and you're a historical purist and it hurts your soul to use the wrong materials on it. You have to be a blank slate and you have to not put your aesthetic upon their designs. You have to be true to their aesthetic and their designs to be able to give them what they want, which is your job. It's not my job to design anything unless they tell me to. There's some designers that I've worked with enough that are like, hey, this hat needs some trim on it. I know you'll do fine, make it beautiful at the end. And that's kind of fun too, but that kind of work actually makes me more nervous than when there's really specific sketches and really specific research and I know exactly what they want because I don't like to backtrack. And I would rather, you know, do something slowly and carefully and get it right the first time than throw a bunch of goo on a hat and have them hate it and then have to take it off and then throw more goo on a hat. And that wastes everybody's time and then everyone gets frustrated. And I prefer to have a pleasant working experience. And some designers really love to get into the nitty gritty of how exactly are you going to make it. And some designers don't care. They just want it sparkly. And so it's really about, and you don't have a lot of time with the designer to like suss out their personality and figure out what they like and how they want to work. So it's again about kind of being careful and being mindful of their design and trying to get as much information out of them as you can, and being really communicative with what works and what won't work and how, without getting too into the nitty gritty, because some designers don't care that that fiber reactive dye isn't going to work on the polyester fabric. They just want that fabric blue. I started doing that. I think it was pretty much when the economy went downhill and I was just looking for ways to make money. And I did a lot of bridal work through that. And I also do upcycled hats, where I'll find just horrible hats in the thrift store and take them apart and turn them into new hats. So some of my favorite examples are like, I turned a cowboy hat into a cloche. And I'll often save all of the offcuts and make trim out of that. And it can be a lot of fun. And I've had quite a few hat sales, and I have an Etsy site that I haven't updated in forever because, you know, then I had a kid or something. Yeah, and I like taking old ugly things and making them into what I think are prettier things.
That.
Well, read From the Neck Up, because that's the best hat making resource book that's out there. It's a little dated. A lot of the suppliers are gone, but the information is really, really solid. There's basically 2, 3 different kinds of hats. There's soft caps, which are like your golf cap, your baseball hat. There's pulled felt hats, which are like a fedora, a cowboy hat, which is made from, you have a hat blank that is usually, it's wool, and fur is kind of higher end, and wool's, you know, from sheep or other little animals. And it's turned into felt. It's turned into kind of a generic hat shape. You get it hot and steamy. You pull it over a hat block, which is generally a wooden form that can look something like this. And then you tack it down. See, this has little channels here that you run cord through once you get the wool all nice and smooth and in all the parts. Blocking cord, when you're working with felt or straw over a hat block, after you have your felt pulled over it, you use this to tie it down. And in the process, I also have this nifty little tool, looks kind of like a cigar, and you can use that to really get it into those creases so that the wool will dry and stay exactly the same shape. And you can use this end to kind of catch it and manipulate it, really get it in there. Yay! Oh, look, it's a finished hat. And then after you've blocked it and put the cord on it, but before it is dry, an important step with felt is to brush it. And you always want to brush it in either counterclockwise or clockwise position, starting from the crown, and you brush all the way down because you want to get all those fibers going in the same direction, and it makes for a more beautiful finished product. And most milliners that I know have 2 brushes, one with light colors, with light colored bristles that you use for the light colored felts, and then one with dark colored bristles for the dark colored, because if I was to brush a black hat with this, it would leave little hairs all over it, and then that would look like cats sat on the hat before I finished making it. And then you let it dry, and then you take it apart, you cut off the excess. You can add a wire, you add some trim, you add some hat sizing, which is generally kind of like shellac, which will make the wool stiffer, and then in the end you'll have something like that. Yay, it's a cloche. I would put it on, but it's really big and would go down to my nose. So that's one technique. The other thing, that hats can be made out of is straw. A lot of times they're made just into long braids or plates, and and then it's sewn in a spiral into a hat shape. And that's a lot of what you see in the stores. They can also be woven, where you have it's woven from the top of the crown and down. And that's what things like Panama hats are made out of. And that is a skill set that's being lost. That's really kind of sad. But the woven straws you can block very similarly to felt. They don't take a lot of subtle shaping, but you basically treat it like felt and block it. I took a millinery course many, many years ago from a woman she was involved on the hats for the Titanic movie. And she had us working with straw because she believed that once you know how to block and work and manipulate straw, then felt is super easy and not a problem. Because straw is just more finicky. You have to be careful about the raw edges falling apart, whereas felt doesn't have raw edges. And so that was a really great experience doing that. But yeah, basically hats are either patterned like a garment or they're pulled over a hat block. And there's, some in between, but those are kind of basically the two ways of doing it. You also can make them out of buckram, which is a stiffened cotton fabric, which is becoming harder and harder to find. It has a lot of pros and cons. It's great because you can iron it, you can shape it with water, you can treat it like a fabric pattern in a lot of ways, but because it's stiffer, you can use it for a lot of hat understructures. But the problem is that if a performer sweats, then because it is so susceptible to water, then the hat will misshape itself and often not shape again. There's a newish material called Phos-Shape, which is a heat-sensitive plastic that acts a whole lot like a cross between felt and buckram, which I think has a lot of interesting potential, and a lot of people are touting it as a buckram replacement since buckram is not being made so much anymore. But I don't know how I feel about that because all the plastic and waste that goes into that. But it is a really interesting alternative. And I think we're going to be using a lot more of that in the future. There's new materials out there. There's new techniques. People are always finding more and interesting things to do and to try to keep up on that so that we can be ahead of the curve. Another cool vintage millinery tool that I have is a flour iron. And what you do with it is you have a bag of sand that you use as kind of a cushion, and you take little bits of silk that you've cut to your flower petal shape. You heat this up and then you use it to shape the petal. And that's how a lot of beautiful handmade flowers will come to have their beautiful shape. Very time consuming. Usually in theater, we just buy the flowers. I think that's all my cool millinery tools that I have here. There's also a really cool device that we have at the shop that's a hat sizer. It's this little like gizmo that has a coil on the outside and a number panel on the inside, and you put it inside a hat and squeeze it and open it up, and it'll tell you exactly how big a hat is, which is a whole lot more efficient than taking a tape measure and running it along the inside of the hat and then losing your place halfway through and having to start over and then having to forget where you started exactly and then having to start over again. Not that I speak from experience. Ooh, we do have an electric hat stretcher. That's really cool. It's a dome-shaped piece that has a heating element in it. So if you need to make your hat bigger, you give it a little bit of steam, you put it on the block, and you can crank the block so that it expands open and makes the hat just a little bit bigger. You can get a good inch or so stretch on a lot of hats if you go slowly and carefully. It can distort the crown, but then you can go in with some steam and even like a tailor's ham. Look, ooh, I happen to have one here. And put the hat on it and steam it back into shape after you've got it to the right size. You just have to be kind of slow and careful so you don't distort things too much. As one of my mentors said, make every hat so that it can pass the drop kick test. You don't want it to look like it can pass the drop kick test, as I think it's from the Neck Up Millinery book, says something about it looking like it's blown together by the wind. You never want to have your stitches all nailing everything down. You want it to look light and airy and effortless. But for theatrical and operatic purposes, you want them to be well built. You want them to be able to handle the performer's sweat, to handle being packed badly in a box. You want them to handle being stepped on backstage and having to be steamed back into shape. And that's important. Get your hands on everything. One of the best advice I was given was learn how to do notes on shoes, how to work on shoes, and you'll always have work, which is kind of proven to be true. Try everything. Don't be afraid to experiment, but also don't be afraid to learn from people who already know what they're doing. You don't have to make it up. You're not alone. The internet was in its infancy when I started, so that wasn't really a resource. We did books and we talked to other humans, but now there's so many great learning resources out there. There's no reason to make it up on your own. Like, get yourself a good foundation of knowledge, and then from those techniques, then experiment and then try what you want to. But I mean, the edge of a hat has gotten wired the same way for a very, very long time. There's no need to reinvent that wheel.